So just a little bit about the structure. I'm going to there's going to be some frontal talking, there's going to be some activities and some opportunities to reflect. And then there's going to be an opportunity to sort of even practice the practice of gratitude. Let's just start. So today we're going to talk about what some of the current stressors are, sort of give it a little bit of context, talk about what resilience is, what that means and what it doesn't mean. And then we're going to sort of dive a little deeper into how the practice of gratitude helps us develop resilience, and why, and the evidence that's behind it, and then do a little bit on some exercises related to practicing gratitude. I'm going to start off by talking sort of about general stressors, and then even talk about sort of, I think, interpersonally ways that we can work on gratitude. And I'll finish off with talking about work. But really everything that I'm saying applies to any aspect of life, right? So in the workplace, in the home life, and out and about in the world. So let's just, all right, let's get to it, right? Let's talk about why we need to adopt an attitude of gratitude, and what's so great about resilience, and what's going on in our environment right now that might be causing us some stress. And so suddenly we all want to be resilient, right? I think we hear that a lot. That's sort of, I think, become a very common term. I don't think I need to tell everyone, life can be stressful, and life these days feels a little bit more stressful maybe than it did a few years ago, right? I mean, there's the usual suspects, family, financial obligations, economic stressors, illness. There are general trends. We are living in I don't know if we're quite post-COVID, but certainly still in the shadows of COVID world. I think anyone who reads the news, there's racial inequity, there's climate change, there's war, a few too many shootings for one's liking. And if we're talking about things in the workplace, some people are dealing with bad management practices, long hours, relationships at work that might be toxic, or at least insufficiently supportive. Job content might not be interesting. Job demands might be maybe there's a poor work-life balance. And something that I'll really touch on mostly at the end is not feeling appreciated or noticed by management at work. And then something that we talk a lot about here at No Shame on You is the fact that we're in a sort of worsening mental health crisis state of the world, right? So the general statistic that we always talk about is that 20% of adults and youth are living with a mental health condition. Typically, we're talking about depression or anxiety, eating disorders, and substance use. Those are actually the big ones. But the reality is that the number of people in the past year who report living with symptoms of depression or anxiety has really gone up dramatically. And so that even if you're not maybe at a clinical level, you're certainly experiencing enough distress that that life might not feel as fulfilling as it had in the past. And so these stressors, right, they're impacting our sense of mental well-being. But at the same time, right, even when there's this mental health distress or this emotional distress, the reality is there's some ongoing positive stuff happening, right? So even with increasing anxiety and depression, for many people, there's also been opportunities for joy and for fulfillment, right? So these could be, more people working at home now, so more opportunities to be with family. One of my favorite things is the ability to wear sweatpants every day to work. I find that a big bonus. So even in the face of a real struggle, it's possible that positive things are happening, and maybe we're not noticing them. And what the research shows is that those who are able to see the positive while acknowledging the negative, and I'm going to say this a few times, I'm not talking about minimizing the negative. I'm not talking about forgetting about the negative. What I'm talking about is the ability to see the positive, that those who can see it actually cope better with psychological distress. And then, in fact, they're positive. And then what that means is that their positive mental health actually is a protective buffer against psychological distress. So it's a little bit of a loop there. But the point is that if you can sort of see the positive, in a sense, your life becomes more positive because that's kind of where you're oriented. All right. And the good news is that adopting a positive outlook is actually something we can all learn. So again, we can acknowledge and accept whatever is causing us distress. And at the same time, we can build some tools to buffer against this psychological distress. And that's what we call resilience. So what is resilience? Resilience is our ability to adapt and bounce back when things don't go as planned. So this is bouncing back in the face of adversity, relationship stress, right? Serious health problems, or workplace or financial stressors. Now, resilience is actually not something particularly extraordinary. It's actually a very ordinary skill that we pretty much use every day, right? We commonly demonstrate resilience. Okay, so I like to, say to people, like, imagine you're going out to lunch with a colleague, and as you're sitting down, your colleague knocks your sandwich off and your sandwich falls to the floor. And that lunch that you were oh so looking forward to is now on the floor and inedible. All right. But chances are, right, you don't lose your temper. Chances are you're not bursting into tears. Chances are you're not telling your colleague off, right? What you've done actually is you've accepted that your sandwich is on the floor and that this was a mistake. And you adapt. Maybe you go and buy another sandwich. Maybe you ask your colleague if she'll share with you the half of the sandwich she's not eating. Maybe you think to yourself, you know what? I have a bar back at my I have a protein bar back at my desk. Right? You've adapted to the situation. That, my friends, is actually what resilience is. That is someone who is practicing resilience. That is someone who can be resilient. Right? And so resilient people view difficult situations as a challenge and as an opportunity for growth. And what they do is that they focus on what they can control. And if you're really lucky after an adverse event, right? So you don't just return to the status quo, but you actually experience some kind of growth, right? So here what we have is there's something adverse happened. You could be in a position where you're focusing on the struggle. You can be in a position where you're resilient, so you kind of overcome and go back to where you were, so you're resilient, or in fact, you can show some growth, right? And the growth, which is a whole other topic, is like these are people who, after some kind of trauma, develop a new appreciation for life, maybe develop some spiritual change, find a calling, find a relationship with a higher being, or become more spiritual, or they develop new relationships. Okay, so that's actually the growth that sometimes can happen from a trauma. So, but bring us back to resilient people. Resilient people are those who view the difficult situations as a challenge, and not as a paralyzing event. So they look at failures as opportunities to learn and to grow. And one of the key things about people who are resilient is that they focus their efforts on situations that they have over which they have personal control. So they don't spend time worrying about events they can't control, because they know that if you put your energy into efforts that you can't control, it actually makes you feel helpless and powerless. So a big part of being resilient is accepting what you can and cannot change, essentially. Now, this isn't to say that resilient people are not experiencing distress or emotional pain. Again, remember, we're not talking about one completely replacing the other. In a way, we're talking really about sort of your mindset and where you're choosing to focus your energies on, okay? So it's just that resilient people in the long term, their recovery from an event, an adverse event, is different. And so the question is, and I think I've sort of alluded to it, is what tips the scale, right? What tips the scale so that you end up more in the growth place and less on the struggle? And that is things like your mindset, and practicing gratitude is one of those tools that gets you that mindset that helps you perceive the world in a certain way. And that perception is the key to resilience. So do you see the event as traumatic, or do you see it as a chance to learn and grow? How do we become resilient? it's not just something you're born with. It is the case. Some people really just come out of the womb and their temperament and they are just risk takers. But it really plays a relatively small role. One of the bigger determinants of resilience is the quality of close relationships early in life. So parents, primary caregivers, what was your early attachment like? And that likely is because partly based on attachment, you're more likely to, try new things, more willingness to fail because you realize that there's a safe place to go back to. We know that early attachment, positive early attachment to parents plays a really crucial role and sort of lifelong role in a human's ability to adapt. But most importantly, is that resilience is a strategy that can be learned. So again, you can think of it as like, yes, there are kids that are born being able, come out of the womb and are clearly going to be Olympic gymnasts, okay? But we know it's not just enough to have that potential. You actually have to go to practice every day, right? And then there are people who might not be born to be Olympian gymnasts, but actually they're pretty, they learn gymnastics, they learn the skills, they learn how to tumble, they work hard at it. Maybe they make it on to their college club team, maybe they don't, but they can do it, and it's helpful and it brings them satisfaction, right? So it is a strategy that can be learned. And now let's turn then to specifically, we've been talking about resilience, we've been talking about gratitude now as a tool or a skill that can help you become resilient. But what is gratitude? Many of us express gratitude, think of gratitude as like when you say thank you to someone who's just helped you or given you a gift. But gratitude is actually more than words. It's more than the action of saying thank you. It's also a positive emotion. So it's more than feeling thankful. It's actually a deeper appreciation for someone or something. And that deeper appreciation for something actually produces a longer lasting positivity. Excuse me. I've always liked this definition, which is that it's a thankful appreciation for what an individual receives, whether tangible or intangible. And with gratitude, you're acknowledging the goodness in your life. So as a result, gratitude also helps people connect to something larger than themselves as individuals, whether it's to other people, whether it's to nature, or whether it's to a higher power. So again, it's not just the thank you, it's the actual sort of connection to something bigger that's a part of it. And again, as I will say over and over again, it can coexist simultaneously with negative emotions. It does not replace them. There are two stages of gratitude. The first is the acknowledgement that there's something good in your life. So in a state of gratitude, you affirm that there are elements in life that you appreciate and that actually make life worth living. The acknowledgement is that you've received something good, both by the presence of whatever you received and also by the effort that the giver put into it, right? So the acknowledgement isn't just for what you received, it's also for the fact that somebody put effort into giving it to you. And related to that is that the gratitude is recognizing that some of the sources of the goodness lie outside of yourself. So you can be grateful to other people, you can be grateful to animals, you can be grateful to a higher being, you can be grateful to something in the world, but you actually cannot be grateful to yourself. That's not practicing gratitude. Because again, what's happening is that at this stage, you're recognizing that the goodness in your life and who to thank for is because somebody else made sacrifices, right? Made some effort that to make you happy. And the purpose of gratitude is either to form new relations or to strengthen current ones. And secondly, because it's intrinsically rewarding, which again we'll get to soon, it's actually then motivating. And so it becomes worthwhile for personal well-being and positive relationships, and again, then a positive work culture. So there are 3 ways then to experience gratitude. So we can think about gratitude as an emotion, right? It's this momentary, emotional experience. It's a temporary state, right? That happens when we realize that something good has happened, and often as a consequence of someone else's efforts, right? So it's the emotion. And then it's also a trait, right? How grateful of a person you are. Like, what's your disposition? Do you have a stable tendency, a regular tendency to experience gratitude as an emotion? And then the third way to experience gratitude is gratitude as a practice, right? So it's something you can do to both elicit or evoke that emotion of gratitude. And then whatever it is that you're doing, you're potentially, if you do it over and over again, you're potentially strengthening it as a trait over time. So it's a practice that opens your mind to seeing the positive. So if you practice it over and over again, like, it actually changes your perception of what you're seeing. So think of think of what happens if you're looking to buy a new car and you've decided, you know what, I think I'm going to go with a Toyota Highlander. Like, it sort of fits my needs. And what ends up happening, I've experienced this, I think many people have too, is then every time you're driving on the road, you suddenly notice a lot of Highlanders. Suddenly you notice that your neighbor down the street has a Highlander. You notice when you're driving on the highway that the car that just passed you was a Highlander. You notice that that other car wasn't a Highlander, but it was another Toyota car, right? Like, suddenly your mindset, your perception is such that you sort of are seeing more Toyotas than you ever did, or Toyota Highlanders than you ever did before. They were all there before, by the way. It's not like suddenly, they didn't just suddenly show up because you were about to buy one, right? But the point is that now you're noticing them more and more. And I love this quote, right, that's on here. Cultivate the habit of being grateful for every good thing that comes to you, and give thanks continuously. And because all things have contributed to your advancement, you should include all things in your gratitude, right? So I love this idea that if we make the choice to appreciate everything around us, we actually always have what to be grateful for. I'm now going to, we're gonna watch something right now, a video. Let's hope technology, okay, hold on, works in our direction. Okay, so this is a video. This kid, I forgot how old he is, but I kind of like it because it's sort of really fun and it makes me really happy. But it's like, let's just, watch, like, let's see what he says about being thankful, okay? And Wendy, can you just give me a thumbs up to confirm that we can hear everything when I start it?
So let's be real. Some days are hard. So I made this list of awesome things I'm thankful for. Yeah. Sometimes I need reminding that things are not all that bad. So I wanted to share a few because you guys are my friends. It's great to be alive. And here's some reminders why. First one, bubble wrap. When cats do their tongue, like this. I'm also thankful for the little paw pads that the cats and dogs have and the sound it makes. Oh, man. I love them. Hey, turn that back on. Oh, no. Change it. Ah, there, that's better. Music is magical. It can make anything better. Right music can make a video better. The same goes with life. Singing. I like paw pats. Singing. If something's boring, just sing it, and that will make it better. Watching paint dry. It's really cool. Old people who still hold hands. Clouds that look like stuff. One time I saw a cloud that looked like an airplane, and I realized it was an airplane. Imagination. Without it, we wouldn't have airplanes, no internet, pants. We gotta wear them, because if we didn't, it would be sort of awkward. Pants. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Sleep. Clothes with funny names, like Windbreaker. Birthday cake. No reason at all cake, just cake. Sorry, we filmed this while I was hungry. Forgiveness. I'm Kid President, but I ain't perfect. Ain't a word. We all mess up, come on. Don't mess up and forget to forgive all the mess ups. Thankful plants undergo photosynthesis, using the energy from the sun to convert carbon dioxide to oxygen, providing us with the air we need to do things like this. I'm bored. Morgan Freeman's voice. Hello, I'm Morgan Freeman. I'm working on it. My voice is changing, but it hasn't changed that much. Food. I go, burger. I know, I already said food, but this is my list and my rules. Happiness. Sadness. Sad isn't bad. It helps you know what you care about. People. Sometimes people can be really people-y, but we need each other. Life's better with people in it. Family, friends, you. Just being alive. Sometimes we forget how it's just great to be alive. We're breathing. Some days are tough, but we got a lot to be thankful for. We just have to look for it sometimes. They say if you have food in your fridge, clothes on your back, and a place to sleep, you're richer than 75% of the world. I did not know that. So what would you add to the list? Let me know. Share this video with someone you're really thankful for. Oh, and of course, also this. Dancing! Brad and I are thankful for all of you. Seriously, thanks for giving us and the whole world a reason to dance. So what are you thankful for? Let me know. KP out. Keep going, keep going, keep going. I'll call this move the stovetop stuffing. I'll call this one the stuffed face nay-nay. I forgot one. There's something that I'm really thankful for. Uncle Jesse from Full House. This is macaroni art of him. It's beautiful. Have mercy. I'm filming a video to encourage people to be thankful. KP out.
Okay. I leave I love that video. I just think it's like just a super.
Okay, class, who would like to do problem 3 on the board? Please don't be me, please.
All right, and we're back. Okay. I'm thankful for that video, right? I mean, that kid is hilarious. It makes me actually think it's maybe one of the only times I'm really thankful for the internet and for, you know, YouTube and the time that it sucks out of my life. But I love that the kinds of things that he's listing, like these are not complex, you know, sophisticated things, right? It's like cake. We'll talk in a few minutes about how it's not just enough to say I'm grateful for cake. You actually have to do a little bit more work than just listing things. But you know, there's a way. And by the way, this young man has I actually just forgot the name of the disorder that he lives with, but it's like his bones break a lot. So he's at that age of 11, I think he'd already had 70 bone breaks or something like that. So so it actually sort of is very meaningful that this is the way in which he is looking to be resilient in the face of clearly something that he is living with, and what are some of the strategies that he's using. A note about gratitude, right, is that we're not talking here, again, I feel like I'm kind of a broken record in some ways, but like this isn't like someone is upset and you say count your blessings or, you know, show some gratitude, right? Because that is never helpful, especially when you're already having a hard time, right? So what you know, so gratitude isn't turning away from or minimizing any suffering or struggle. It's about the sort of the mindset in the sense of like what you're, you know, with an array of things to choose what to look at. even when they all exist, what are you looking at? So one of the ways that people figure out their baseline, I guess, of being grateful is psychologists and researchers have figured out all sorts of tools to figure out all sorts of things, including ways to look at your baseline or dispositional level of gratitude. There's actually a full-length questionnaire. I think I actually forgot how many questions it has, but there's a short version of it, and this is what we have on here. And it's a self-report measure and designed to assess individual differences in the way we experience gratitude in daily life. And actually, we're going to take a moment now and we're going to do it. So although I didn't tell people to have pen and paper with them, but let's try it. Okay, so there are 6 questions here. And using the scale below, the scale here, you should write a number beside each statement to indicate how much you agree with it, in the sense of how much does it apply to you, okay? So I have so much in life to be thankful for. If you very strongly agree with that, you're going to give yourself disagree with that, you're going to give yourself a 1. And if you really strongly agree with that, you're going to give yourself a 7. And if you're somewhere in between, right? If you just agree, just disagree, 2. If you're neutral, you'll give yourself a 4, right? All right. And so at this point, I'm going to give you, a couple minutes to just literally do 1 through 6, and give yourself a number anywhere from 1 to 7, where 7 is strongly agree. Like this 100% describes who I am. And 1 is, this has nothing to do with me. I don't even recognize this statement. And if people just want to indicate, I don't know, you can maybe raise your hand or something, just let me know when you're done. Of course, I don't actually see everybody, but I can get a sense of, okay. Okay, so now, I just drew on here. Okay, now let's do a little bit of math, okay? But unfortunately, this is not straightforward. Again, this is a real questionnaire. I did not make this up, so I apologize for some of the scoring instructions here. All right, there's 3 stages. Step 1 is add up your scores for items 1, 2, 4, and 5. So you'll note I had highlighted 3 and 6, so ignore those right now. You're adding up 1, 2, 4, and 5. Okay. And now, step 2, you're going to reverse your scores for items 3 and 6. What does that mean? It means if you gave yourself a 7 on item 3, you're now going to give yourself a 1. And if you gave yourself a 6, you're now going to give yourself a 2. And if you gave yourself a 5, you're going to give yourself a 3. And you're going to do the same thing for question number 6. So if you gave yourself a 1, you're going to now give yourself a 7. If you gave yourself a 2, you're going to give yourself a 6 now. And you're going to take those reversed scores for 3 and 6, and you're going to add those up. And now you're going to take the total from step 1 and you're going to add those to the reverse scores of step 2. And that is your total, this is the gratitude questionnaire. So that is your total score for your gratitude questionnaire. And so your number should be somewhere between 6 and 42. And then here are some of the benchmarks. All right. If you scored 41 or 40, well, if you got a 41, actually, literally, it means that you're in the 75th percentile of gratitude. Your sort of disposition, your gratitude disposition, you're in the 75th percentile, right? So that means that you're and if you scored a 42, actually, then you're in the top 13%, by the way, for those who took the survey. 50th percentile is someone who scored a 38 on this questionnaire. And if you scored 35, then you're in the 25th percentile. And so the higher your score here is, right, the higher your generalized tendency to recognize and respond with grateful emotions to the world around you, or the way that people are interacting with you. And there's evidence, actually, by the way, that this questionnaire is positively related, right? So it kind of predicts. So like the higher you are on this questionnaire, the more likely you are to measure higher in optimism and in life satisfaction, and in demonstrating empathy. Whereas the more negative, whereas it's more, so again, the higher you score on this, the less likely you are to show symptoms consistent with depression and anxiety, or even envy. And again, remember, we're talking general tendencies, and we're not necessarily talking cause and effect, right? This is just general tendencies. And again, another quote that I love, sort of annoyed, I don't know how I drew this yellow on there, but anyway, I love this quote, right? Some people are always grumbling because roses have thorns. I am thankful that thorns have roses. So this is, I guess, a little bit of like the sort of like glass half full, glass half empty sort of idea. And also, I also just want to highlight that this is something that, like, it can take work, right? Like, just this isn't something that people necessarily, like I said, some people come by it quasi-naturally, but still something you have to work on, especially when things are difficult and challenging, is to sort of make a very conscious choice of noticing that the thorns come with roses and not that the roses are coming with thorns, right? So how do we know, right, all this, why are we talking about gratitude? Because we're talking about gratitude as a way to increase resilience and boost one's well-being. And there's actually pretty compelling evidence from research. This is a relatively newer field in psychology. And by newer, I mean, we're talking, it could be, 30 years at this point, but this is really, and a lot of this work started out at Penn, University of Pennsylvania. There's a guy there named Marty Seligman. He's written a lot of books, by the way, also on gratitude, that are accessible to any, sort of meant for popular consumption. The studies are either correlational, right? So those are studies which look at, if you have one trait, is that associated with another trait? So there's, again, no cause and effect there. It's like saying that people who are taller, well, I was going to say people who are taller weigh more, but that's actually not necessarily a good one. But like there are lots of, just associations where you don't know what came first. And then there are intervention studies, which we'll also talk about, and they all kind of show this this trend, right? So gratitude, people who are able to show sort of a gratitude disposition, or who practice gratitude, they're more likely to, be more satisfied in life, have more positive social relationships, have better health, by the way, especially when it comes to stress and sleep, which tends to mean fewer cardiovascular issues, lower rates of diabetes, more energy, more optimism, right? So these are the correlational studies. And then there are intervention studies, and these are studies where basically you manipulated, you took people, you threw something at one group that you didn't do at another group, right? Which in our case is you did some kind of gratitude exercise. And then later you look to see if there's a difference between the two groups, the group that did the gratitude exercise and the group that did not. And we call that group that did not, we call that a control group. And what's nice about these kinds of studies is that you have much more control over what's the cause and what's the effect. And you can look at change over time, right? So so we'll start with, I'm just going to highlight like 3 studies because I think they show in some ways how the practice of gratitude isn't necessarily difficult. It's the sort of the need to be very consistent about it that can be more challenging to do it. But the impact is pretty quick. So in this study, basically participants, again, one group did this, another group did not. And the group that did this was the group that wrote once a week, they would write a letter of thank you to someone who had been especially kind to them, but who had never been properly thanked. So they made the effort of like thinking through what was that important, significant thing that was done for which I'm grateful, who did it, why am I grateful? And they wrote a letter to that person. And the results showed that the participants who engaged in letter writing exercise reported more happiness 1 month after the intervention compared to the control group. So this isn't just that the happiness and the improved sense of well-being was during the period that they were writing the letters. There was actually an effect afterwards, like it sort of had a longer lasting impact. The next study, which is, I think, my favorite, is that patients who had been diagnosed with stage B heart failure were asked to keep a gratitude journal for 8 weeks. And every day during those 8 weeks, they were asked to enter 3 entries about what went well that day, and also to provide a causal explanation, right? So it isn't just, I'm so glad Uncle Jesse visited me today. I'm so glad Uncle Jesse visited me today because I was feeling a little lonely. But when he came by, he brought me flowers and he made me laugh. And it was just so nice to, not worry about my health for an hour that day. Right. So one group wrote that and another group did not, they did something else, but they did not do this journal writing. And compared to the controls, right, compared to the group that did not write the gratitude journal, the patients who kept gratitude journals for 8 weeks showed their sort of gratitude scores went up. So their sort of general sense of that they had things to be grateful for went up. Their mood improved, all great. But most importantly, they had their biomarkers, which indicated they had more biomarkers, which indicated reduced cardiac risk. So literally this gratitude exercise actually reduced the possibility of them going into heart failure. And so they had this great quote in there, but it seems like a more grateful heart is indeed a more healthy heart. That's in that one. And then this third study that I'm going to just talk on is college kids who were experiencing or living with depression and anxiety, and they were starting therapy. And so all the kids were in therapy, but one of the groups, they were instructed to write a letter of gratitude to another person each week for 3 weeks. So you got therapy. Everyone got therapy. One group also got therapy plus gratitude letter. And it turns out, and everyone, by the way, their indicators of depression and anxiety improved for everyone. But the group that wrote the gratitude letters actually reported significantly better mental health, even 12 weeks after the writing exercise ended, compared to those who did not engage in that exercise. So it really seems like this engaging in gratitude practice, and not necessarily the most complicated exercises, can help. And the way it does it, I'm only going to focus really on one main thing here, is the way in which it changes your mindset. It widens your perspective. It actually impacts the lens through which you see the world. So it sort of helps you, it kind of biases your brain to then see more possibilities during the day, and to see more of the things that are good. In contrast, by the way, negative emotions like anxiety, or things that are associated with depression, actually narrow one's focus on a problem. Like that, we kind of know that people who are sort of living with depression or anxiety view the world more narrowly. And that those who have more positive emotions, which is something you can generate through some of these gratitude practices, actually expands the way that you're willing to see the world. And we also, I think what's really interesting is that you can see that it's longer lasting, right? Now, we probably want something that's longer lasting than a month, but the point is that if you're engaging in some of these practices, you can sort of keep it up. So gratitude, is just a reminder, is something that we can practice and we can get better over time, and it's worth doing. So let's actually talk about how to do it. The one thing that I've liked the most is the gratitude journals. And it's something that, because it sort of helps you get into the mindset of in a sort of ongoing way, right? It's like it's like basically forming a habit. It's something you should do. You could do, let's say, 3 times a week. You could do it daily, but you could do it. Find what works for you. They say morning or night. I think I prefer morning, because I think it gets the day. It sets you off for how you're gonna. It's like exercising in the morning or eating a healthy breakfast, right? Like it's just a good way to start the day. And there's really no wrong way to do it. But here are the right ways to do it, or here are the ways that I think are most important. One is being specific in terms of what you're naming. So specificity. 2 is to make sure you provide a causal explanation. So this is, why am I grateful, right? So this is the difference between saying, I'm grateful that my neighbor mowed my lawn. That's fantastic. But better is, I'm grateful that my neighbor mowed my lawn because it made me realize that there was someone watching over me, and that I'm not alone and I'm cared for, right? So you see that sort of you get a little bit more in depth. It's far more effective. And it's important to note what emotions you're experiencing. Going for depth over breadth is important. So, elaborating a little bit more, and instead of just listing things. When I say get personal, we know that like I said, you can be grateful to a person, you can be grateful to an animal, you can be grateful to nature, to higher being, but focusing on people for whom you're most grateful actually has the most impact. Recording events that were sort of unexpected also tend to have more of an impact. They tend to elicit stronger levels of gratitude. If you're going to repeat something, like, so for instance, I'm grateful for my sibling, just make sure that it's not always the same thing every time. So if you repeat, revise it, but zero in on a different aspect. And writing regularly, whether it's every day, every other day, whatever it is, just, once a week, just commit to a regular time and to doing it. Writing them down is really helpful because it forces you to articulate your thoughts. And having a physical record is also great because then you can look back on things, which can also be really helpful. Some people find like an accountability buddy or like a gratitude buddy, like so someone you're willing to once a week get together with and talk about what you were grateful for that week based on what you've done in the journal. And it's important to remember that it can be kind of awkward at the beginning to engage exercise, but you just have to keep at it, and then it just becomes, you know, part of your daily routine. We'll send these out. By the way, we're going to send a few things out, I think, after this program. But, you know, here, you know, the kinds of prompts that you can consider, right? So there's lots, right? The best part of the day, or a fun experience I had, or something that I learned today, right? Like these are all prompts and things that that maybe if we didn't take the moment to acknowledge them and to appreciate them, we might not realize that there's actually all these things for which we can be grateful. Now, everything that I've been talking about today in terms of the importance of gratefulness, being grateful, like I said, it's like applies to daily life, but I do want to just say a couple things about the work, you know, specifically around gratitude in the workplace. Not surprisingly, it's really important to show gratitude at work, right? Like when we work in a warm, inviting, and safe environment, you know, in a place where your efforts are consistently valued, then like people feel reinvigorated and energized and want to, you know, and more supported at work, right? So, and the number one reason that people leave their jobs is that they don't feel appreciated, or that they feel like someone isn't grateful for their contributions. And I think there was a Department of Labor study that showed that something like 65% of workers said they did not receive a single word of praise in the past year. So that's kind of amazing. And by the way, 60% said that they've never expressed gratitude towards a colleague, right? So it goes both ways, but like that we don't even think about how important that could be. But showing gratitude in the workplace boosts performance, it boosts engagement, productivity, retention, and that leads to, you know, innovation and an improved performance. And I think, you know, some of the outcomes are that people then develop a stronger sense of self-worth and self-efficacy, and there's greater group cohesiveness and more productivity. And grateful employees are the ones who perform more what's called organizational citizenship behaviors, right? So they're the ones, they perform things that aren't part of their job description, like they're more likely to fill in for workers that are absent. They're more likely to do, you know, sort of, you know, whatever. They're just more trusting of one another and are more likely to help each other out. So when you make sure that there's a culture of gratitude at your workplace, what you're really doing is you're kind of building up a psychological immune system that sort of cushions you individually and as an organization when things are struggling. So I will, in conclusion, right, we talked about what resilience is, we talked about what gratitude is, and how engaging in gratitude is helpful, and how important it is to develop a culture of gratitude, both in your personal life, but also in the workplace. It's certainly the practice of gratitude is not a quick heal or immediate relief for stress. And it doesn't mean we're always going to be happy. Right? It means we're accepting that things might not be going right, and we're going to focus. But the focus shifts on not what's wrong, but sort of how to make it right, or how to make ourselves feel right. Right? These like gratitude journals, like we can't, you know, we're not going to expect a miracle from them, but you get a closer view of the idea that there are still things that are right that exist in our world. And that's where the benefit of gratitude practice lies, right? It provides us with just other resources necessary to increase our well-being and to develop emotional resilience. And I'd say, I think we can all use a bit of that these days. So that's...
Anat, thank you. We did get a couple of questions. and the timing is right because it's 12:55. A couple people had to leave for jump for their next meeting, but they did say that they really enjoyed it so far. So thank you. One question was, could you give examples of some ways to express gratitude in the workplace?
Oh. Yeah, it's funny. I actually skipped over that slide. So let me see if I still. So I love that question because I happen to have a prepared answer for it. Anyway, well, actually, and I think actually, by the way, this doesn't just, we're going to talk about, the question is about the workplace, but actually it applies, again, we're not necessarily talking about spending money, right? Like there are lots of ways to show appreciation that have more to do with acts and intentions than necessarily something physical. So I'm not, so we can all agree that, salary is a great way to show gratitude. And by the way, I think it's one of the reasons that, like, when we talk about lack of parity in salary, sometimes between men and women, it isn't just a principle thing. It's also I want to know that my employer appreciates and has the same gratitude towards what I do as a woman than my male counterpart, right? That's part of actually where the desire for equal pay comes from. I mean, among some other obvious principles. There are some workplaces that have like appreciation platforms, right, where employees can recognize each other's contributions. So it can be a website or it can be a bulletin board, but there are ways that not everybody likes to be called out. On the other hand, people like the idea that there's a place to thank somebody, and you're sort of introducing the culture of we need to be thinking about thanking people when they do things that are helpful to us. There are people who at like staff meetings, like every staff meeting, there needs to be a moment of gratitude, and you have to do it every time. Like you have to start every meeting off that way, because again, that changes the culture and also makes sure that, it actually is a great way to start a meeting, just because it really sets the tone for, we're all lucky to be working here and here's why. And again, it has to be specific, right? So it's not just, I'm so glad that there's coffee every morning when I come into the office. It's, I'm so appreciative that Joe, the administrative assistant, knows how important coffee is for all of us. And he comes in every morning at 7:55 to make sure that by 8:15, when we all come in, we have coffee, right? So really specific. Obviously gift giving is one way, but you can also, say thanks by, taking on, scut work, right? Like things that you don't want to do, right? Showing that sort of organizational citizenship behaviors that are just helpful to others that I mentioned earlier, giving people extra days off. I've seen, this is the last thing, the neighborhood school that I walk by here every day, there is a designated parking spot for the head of school, and then there's a designated parking spot for the head custodian. Those are the only two designated spots. And to me, man, oh man, does that indicate something to everyone about what we should be grateful for, right? So there are lots, so there are things like that, I would say are ways to think about it.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions, but I want to be sensitive to people's time. So if everyone's okay, we are going to conclude the formal portion of our program, and then we'll hang on for a couple minutes for whoever wants to stick on for just another question or two. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I'm putting in the chat just a short survey. It takes literally a minute to fill out if you have time. It helps us make sure we're on the mark and doing a good job, and helps us also report back to our generous funders. So thank you so much, Anat, for this meaningful presentation. Our next Feed Your Mind series is on February 9th. It's a Feed Your Mind series on mental health and wellness for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I'll put our website in the chat so you can please check back anytime for different events. I'm going to do that right now. I did it correctly. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And I'm just going to ask a couple more questions if people want to hang, and if you want to jet, have a great day. And we hope to see you again. Another question, Anat, was, in addition to gratitude, what would you say would be other ways that we can practice it? If you can give a couple tips and tools that way.
Wait, you mean in addition to like the gratitude journal?
Journaling. Yes.
Oh, well, yeah, well, I should, what I might do actually, it's a sort of a list of things, and a lot of it does have to do with like, there is like this idea of like, of making lists as one way, but there are gratitude jars, there's sort of mindful gratitude activities. We didn't have time today. I mean, I didn't think we would, but like, I know that on the Peloton app, but you can find it on YouTube, they do like mindfulness activities that are grateful, like that are oriented around around gratitude. So like starting the day with like a 5-minute mindfulness meditation that's focused on gratitude is like a super helpful thing. I am totally
Maybe
like,
a mantra.
Yeah, or like a mantra. The other thing, by the way, that people, if you have a sort of spiritual or religious sort of tendency or propensity, right? Like there are lots of traditions that actually have a lot of prayers that are very much focused on like being thankful. And so the idea is to sort of there are lots of places you can grab it from. It doesn't even have to be that formal. The important thing is to just be doing it consistently and regularly. And then making sure that when something happens that you're not happy about, which is going to be at lots of times during the day, right? Like, is to say, okay, I can be really upset about this. And like, I'm wondering, like, what is the opportunity here? Or what am I learning from this experience? Like, I can just think of someone that we were once advising who was really unhappy at their internship. It was like a young woman, and she was really, really unhappy. And the important part in the discussion with her was, okay, this part isn't working. Okay, but now, like, what have you learned from it? And what are the skills you're going to take from this to the next, your next step? It doesn't change that she was actually pretty miserable some of the time that she was there. But what it did mean was that she was able to sort of sit and say, okay, but I got something out of it that actually has helped me grow, that I'm going to, I'm going to know to ask the right questions when I go to my next job. And B, like, this is a skill I didn't realize I had, and now I'm going to make sure that I utilize it. And that's part of the mindset piece of like, it's not just sort of the daily practice, it's then just making sure that you are aware of the need to shift throughout the day.
I think that's excellent. And I think you answered the final question in that answer, which was, how do we acknowledge the bad stuff? And from what I heard from you is, we all have bad stuff, right? We all have bad things in our lives. But if we can take those bad things and shift the mental model to what have I learned, instead of living in misery, but what have I learned and how can I grow from it and do better?
Yeah.
Right?
Also, yes, 100%. Also, sometimes you just need to ask for help, right? Like, that's the other thing, right? Like, let's remember that, especially right at No Shame on You, one of our things is like the sort of idea that like there are a lot of people who are living with symptoms that interfere with their ability to enjoy themselves. And one of the most important things to do is to actually find other people who can support you, or find ways to not be alone, or find ways to whether it's therapy or exercise or whatever it is, but to know that you're not alone. And that there are actually supports out there, ones that you can ask for and ones that you can find that exist within the community.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for hanging out in our virtual lobby. If anyone wants to say hello and unmute, you can. This is our schmooze fest, which means just talking afterwards. We'll hang on for a minute or two, but thank you, Anat, and thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to be presenting for you today. I am going to actually share my screen. So just give me 1 second. I'm not great at multitasking. Does everyone see my the PowerPoint presentation over there? Fantastic. Okay.